This talk is called Advice on How Not to Kill Your Dreams. And of course, I don't mean by dream here what you have when you go to sleep at night. Okay, this is not on sleep therapy, because I've had some inquiries, really. What I mean is, of course, an all-consuming passion, you know, a longing for a major achievement. And to me, this suggests a long-term goal, you know, like a career, not some short-term titillation. You know, if your idea of a dream is, oh, I want to own a Ferrari, then I'm sorry, but the Hedonist Summer Conference is on the second floor on the left. Only nobody came because nobody felt like showing up. But anyway, Dr. Peikoff always says that you have to motivate your audience. But I had to cut so much material for my talk that I figured if you came here to hear career advice from a German who's never held a proper job in his life, then you must be among the hardcore motivated. So we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Fountainhead, and the Fountainhead was the big game changer for me. But what I couldn't believe was when I gave the book to friends, very often the character of Rourke was met with great skepticism and such pearls of wisdom such as, oh, life is not like that. You know, you can't be so single-tracked in life. That's great in theory, but in the real world, you have to compromise, etc. Ever heard that one before? Well, what I'm going to tell you is, yes, life is like that. There are real Howard Rourkes out there, people with unyielding integrity, who have stood up for what they believed in and risked everything against great obstacles. And I want to focus particularly on the issue of integrity, right? And give you the courage to go after your dream. But first, I have to delimit my assignment tonight. I'm not trying to prove that integrity is always rewarded. No one could do that because it isn't true. Right? There is no invisible man in the clouds that hands out rewards to people of integrity and punishes the sellouts. What I do want to emphasize is that second-handedness, you know, the Peter Keating method from the Fountainhead, that second-handedness is a recipe for disaster, and that integrity indeed can lead to success. And if you have a dream, what you must do is follow in Rourke's footsteps. And I'm going to give some pretty drastic advice on how not to kill your dream at the end. So what qualifies me, of all people, to talk about this? I have to give you a bit of my personal background so you can see where I'm coming from. Yeah, Germany, obviously, but that's not what I mean. So, as some of you know, I'm a professional juggler. I'm an entertainer. Learned to juggle at the age of 14, and this thing really grabbed me. At around 16, I spent all of my free time practicing, and I mean all of my time. I quit senior high school when I was 17, almost 18, because I figured that's how I wanted to spend my life, and that I didn't need some sort of diploma for that. So after having made my first steps performing at the local flea market or whatever, I quit school 2 years away from graduation and became a professional juggler. Now, of course, my parents loved that. I mean, who doesn't love it when their child is running away with the circus, right? I mean, in my case, almost literally. You see. Never did circus, never in my life. And of course, there were, you know, bitter fights and all of that, but in the end, what could they do? And from that day on, I literally locked myself up in a room and practiced from morning till night and gave it everything I had. And that means, for instance, I used to start at 8 in the morning, you know, not 5 past 8, and I was very strict and disciplined. I mean, talk about being German, right? Because I figured that was my job now, you see. Other people didn't show up at work whenever they felt like it either, you know. And I stopped, so started at 8 in the morning, and I stopped at 10 at night when I was absolutely exhausted and when my hands would bleed, which they often did. And I can remember vividly that every morning I had to soak my fingers in hot water for 30 minutes because my hands were so callous. I couldn't move my fingers anymore in the morning. And I admit, I was more than naive. I never thought about a business plan, about marketing, about anything concerning the business side of it. I just threw caution to the wind and thought I would figure these things out as they came up. Or to be more honest, I never thought about these things at all. I thought they would just take care of themselves, really. I was sort of wordlessly convinced that as long as you deliver good work, that there was a way to make a living out of this period. Now, if you think, well, that's certainly highly idealistic, I would flat out deny that. I always thought that was hard-headed realism. Because even as a teenager, I realized that I would be no good at anything else. This is what I wanted to do, and I would hate every minute of some other 9-to-5 job. And I felt that I had to put in these insane 14-hour days because I knew failure was always an option. And if I was going to fail, it was not for want of trying. If people didn't like what I was doing, I had no control over that, of course. But this was the part I myself was in control of, and I went beyond the limit of what I could physically and mentally withstand, certainly. And of course, that didn't go down very well with friends and family, because they certainly couldn't relate to this at all, but I thought that was their problem. Just one quick example of how single-tracked I was. When the Berlin Wall came down, right? That was the event of the century. I mean, the whole country was ecstatic, right? I mean, nobody believed it at that time, and I almost didn't notice it. It was like, hey, Philipp, the wall came down. Yeah, very nice too. And I was certainly living in my own world at the time, and it had the size of a juggling ball. That's who I was at the time. And then at the age of 19 or 20, somebody gave me the Fountainhead to read, and this thing hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, I think the parallels here are hard to miss. I mean, not that I'm trying to say that I myself am a creative genius like Rourke. I mean, far from it. It's just that here was somebody who would do absolutely anything to make his dream come true. He wouldn't think of anything else than the work that he loved, and who would never compromise. And that blew me away. I remember one afternoon, I absolutely had to stop reading, and take a walk to consider the implications of what I had just read, and that there was someone who knew all these things. That I thought I was the only one in the world. Do you remember the line from Rourke? Quote, "I don't intend to build in order to have clients. I intend to have clients in order to build," unquote. You see, that man knew what I was thinking and had acted on unknowingly, of course. And against all odds, after 27 years, I'm still a juggler, still in love with it, only I don't call it a career. I call it an ongoing apprenticeship, because I'm still trying to learn how this business works, actually. So much for my personal background, and later I'm going to share some of the experiences that I found helpful in pursuing my dream, and which I think are more widely applicable, really. I'm relying, of course, here on your power of abstraction, right? Because when I say juggling, you fill in photography or whatever, running your own shoe shop or cheese folding or whatever it is that floats your boat. Okay, so I want to discuss the issue of integrity with a couple of examples today, one negative and one positive, because nothing shows the issue of first-handedness versus second-handedness better than examples from real life. So I would like to start my first example of how to kill your dreams, on how to kill your dreams, with someone you all know, although you may not be aware of the fact. So, Act 1, enter Dee Snider. So, who on earth is Dee Snider? Dee Snider is this charming young fellow here, and he used to be in Twisted Sister. You may remember that one from the 80s. Come on, sing along, come on. Okay, now I have tremendous respect for this man, and he is maybe my favorite singer of all time, and he has some very admirable traits, as you will see in a moment. But my point here, of course, is not to sell you this band or this kind of music even. I mean, if you haven't discovered rock and roll by now, that's your own funeral. My point here is the lesson that we can learn from him, and I think it's very instructive. So, back to Dee Snider. At the age of 10, he saw the Beatles on TV and decided that he was going to be a rock star, and that's what he did. So during his early 20s, he and his band Twisted Sister, that is these charming fellows here, they played clubs in New York State, New York City, out there on stage 6 nights a week, making good money, practicing their craft, writing material, and working on their career. And I have tremendous respect for him because he is one hell of a stage performer. I mean, this man is an Olympic athlete. He is a wild animal. It's really quite unbelievable. And he was always very much down to earth, never did drugs and never went into this sort of debauchery you would expect from a typical rock and roller. Now, I knew Twisted Sister before I ever heard the name Ayn Rand, and I think that Twisted Sister was one of the major influences that set me up for Ayn Rand, because the one constant theme of their songs is a very individualistic, get the hell out of our way, never give up your dream attitude, all delivered in a very standoffish, middle finger to the sky sort of attitude. And just to give you a few examples of this individualism, here's a few examples of it. And please bear in mind that this is within the limits of a 3-minute rock and roll song in a language that a teenager can relate to. So here's from one of their songs, quote, "They always told me I must try to be like everyone in the nation. Go with the flow, remember me is we, there must be no deviation. Well now, I think that I'll go my own way, I've got my own point of view. I just don't care what other people say, I do what I want to do," unquote. And here's from another song just quickly. Quote, "How I tried to please you, live the way you said, do the things that you do like the living dead. Then the truth that hit me, got me off my knees, it's my life I'm living, I'll live as I please." I mean, say what you want, but this man is not a conformist. And please bear it in mind, because it's going to be important in a minute. But the problem with Twisted Sister was that no matter how many nights they brought down the house in clubs, they couldn't get a record deal. Well, you might say, no wonder, look at these people. I mean, hairy dudes in clown makeup. I mean, what could go wrong? But they tried every trick in the book, and even some tricks that are not in the book, and everything that could go wrong did go wrong, okay? Like, for instance, they booked themselves at tremendous expense into the prestigious New York Palladium for one show. And that was something that unsigned bands just didn't do. I mean, it was unheard of. It just doesn't happen, you see? And they sold out the show in one day, and they invited representatives from all major record labels, and they sold out the show in one night, and this was going to be their breakthrough, right? And on rehearsal night, the guitarist has an epileptic fit, had to be hospitalized. That meant no show, no representatives, no contract, nothing. Little later, some executive from a European record label saw them perform, came to their dressing room after the show, his mind absolutely blown by what he had just witnessed, and he said he was going to sign them, absolutely no question, done deal. This was their breakthrough, their dream come true. Next day, guy flies back to Europe, has a heart attack while on the plane and popped off. I mean, and then again, a few years later, they finally did manage to get signed. And they actually recorded their first album. And when they were ready to go on tour, the company turned belly up and the tour never got started. Now, at this point, you could have easily converted them to Hinduism, I think. I mean, they must have wondered, you know, what they've done wrong in a previous life. But they wouldn't give up. You know, they knew what they had in them, and they simply wouldn't give up. And then finally, in 1981, after 2,000 concerts together, they finally scored a deal with a major record label, and in 1984, they released their multi-platinum album, Stay Hungry, and this thing made them poster boys for rock and roll. I mean, they were on MTV 24/7, they were on the radio, they suddenly had it all, you know, mansions, chauffeured limousines, credit card with no limits, the whole thing. So they had finally arrived, they were rock stars in the true meaning of the word. Sounds good so far, right? Looks like integrity won out in the end, right? But wait. Like in so many cases, money seems to be a drug with very bad side effects. And it screwed him up very badly. He wanted success, but he forgot to ask himself, what do I want to be successful at? Suddenly, his interest was no longer on the quality of the work, but on the money he could make. And when it became time to discuss their follow-up album, Snyder recalls a conversation with the president of the record company, in which Snyder came up with this ingenious plan to go to the top of the music industry. Now, get this, because it holds the key to everyone's downfall. Quote from his book, Shut Up and Give Me the Mic, a very funny book, which you should all read it. This book is hilarious. I mean, this book is a laugh a minute. I mean, it is a scream, and it makes points. So here's from his autobiography, Shut Up and Give Me the Mic, about his ingenious plan. Quote, my plan was simple. Have songs on the album that would appeal to every single segment of the audience, from the hit-oriented pop metal lightweights to the most hardcore headbangers. It would appeal to everybody, including the parents of our fans, unquote. Now, this statement shocked me. I mean, you can't beat that as a statement of the second-hander mentality. You see, here the focus is no longer on the quality of the songs or the work that he likes, but he is sort of like second-guessing what the audience would or should like, you see? And I say a statement like that is impossible to anyone who has read and understood The Fountainhead. It is too obviously a mental transcript of the second hand of Peter Keating. And I think if someone had handed Snyder a copy of The Fountainhead in high school, everything would have gone well, but there was no free books for teachers program by the ARI in those days, so too bad. So they released the album, and it was supposed to take over the world, right? Millions of dollars went into it, you know, production and marketing and the upcoming tour and all of that. And it was a total disaster. It was a total flop. Instead of appealing to everybody, the commercial songs alienated their longtime followers who despised the band for having sold out. And the heavier tracks scared away the people it was intended to win over. So it was an utter catastrophe. The album set like lead in record shops. Attendance at the concerts was meager, and from day one they were bleeding money like crazy. Tour had to be cancelled, and because the band individually had signed a contract that held them financially liable for the money advance, they ended up in bankruptcy, and I mean utter financial ruin. You know, from chauffeured limousines to no car at all. And that's how bad it was for Snyder. Now you may ask yourself, how is it possible that someone can combine, on the one side, you know, this sort of rock and roll individualism with the premise of the second-hander on the other? And I think what is relevant here is addressed by Ayn Rand for the New Intellectual. Quote from Ayn Rand. That which is merely implicit is not in men's conscious control. They can lose it by means of other implications without knowing what it is that they are losing or when or why, unquote. And that's why even rock and rollers need a philosophy, right? And Ayn Rand made this point in a letter to a fellow writer from 1944. And here's from a book of letters. By the way, also a book you all should read. Not everyone has read it, as far as I know. It's a gem of a book, really. And so here's Ayn Rand giving advice to a fellow writer. Quote, "Of anything I may tell you, this is the most important. Do not set out to write with your eyes on the box office. It can't be done. You must write that which you consider good, to be the best of your judgment, taste, and ability. There is no other rule or standard to go by. If you commit the above popular error, it is a fatal error, and your writing effort will be doomed in advance. You must have a clear conception of what writing is, in essence and in principle, before you attempt to write. And of all the things which writing isn't, box office chasing is the foremost," unquote. And the same holds true for rock and roll or juggling or anything else in the world, I say. Now, to finish the story on a happier note, Snyder did eventually become a success in the entertainment industry, although not quite the way it intended, in the movies and radio and Broadway, but he had certainly learned his lesson the hard way. So, once again, please read that book by Dee Snider. It's a very good book, but I'm happy to answer questions on that in the question period. Now, to come to a band that didn't kill their dream, exit Dee Snider, enter Rush. We could have that for, okay, we don't have the time, unfortunately. So, I think the connection between Ayn Rand and Rush has been widely recognized, but just for the heck of it, a quick reminder for those of you who haven't heard of it. Rush started out in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada, playing, high school dances and clubs, etc. And they were signed in their early 20s, and you must have heard the saying, be so good they can't ignore you, and this is certainly true with those guys. They are simply outstanding musicians. What do I have to do to put them back on? Okay. And there have been discussions whether this is their home planet, indeed. First album, 1974, not a big hit. Second album, 1975, not a big hit. Then they never got any radio airplay because of these, in the 70s, these long, highly complex fantasy concept pieces running 12 minutes, 20 minutes even. 20 minutes, that's an average career in the Trump administration. So, now, I want to ask you not to dismiss these guys as just another rock band, because philosophically, they understand the issues. Our kinds of issues, and they are explicit about it. Their songs circle around, individualism, pride, selfishness, free will, ambition, productivity, the unity of mind and body, etc. And I said earlier that I wasn't trying to sell you Twisted Sister, but now I am trying to sell you Rush, yes. Because can you afford to pass up on a band who says things like this? Here's from their song Anthem, quote, "Well, I know they've always told you selfishness was wrong, yet it was for me, not you, I came to write this song," unquote. How often have you heard a band praising selfishness? Explicitly. And I think you owe it to yourself to at least give them a try, because there are real gems here, and you shouldn't simply dismiss them because you sort of have tried 3 songs and you didn't like them after playing them once. They're just not that kind of band. And if you ask me in the question period, I will give you a playlist, but please do ask it because it's important. Now, I say I would not have made it without Rush. There were moments when I was absolutely overcome by despair and hopelessness and self-doubt. And that's very common with performers and artists in general, because there is no textbook to go by, you see. And I remember sitting there on the floor in my room and crying like a baby, really, because I had gone, beyond the limit of what I could physically and mentally endure, and I couldn't take it anymore. Thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I learn this trick? I gave it everything I had. Why can't I have the only thing I ever wanted, etc.? It's completely useless. But, there were moments like that. And I hated myself for being weak. I hated every bone in my body, and I never wanted another day like this in my life ever. It was the bottom of the blackest pit, really, and in those moments of despair, I needed something to bring me back to the benevolent universe, although I didn't know that term in those days. And Rush was certainly the tonic that did it for me. And just to give you two quotes here from two songs that I simply can't resist. Here is from their song, The Pass, quote, "All of us get lost in the darkness. Dreamers learn to steer by the stars," unquote. That line alone did it for me. I don't know where I'm going, but it's somewhere there. And here's from another song called Bravado, quote, "If we burn our wings, flying too close to the sun, if the moment of glory is over before it's begun, if the dream is won, though everything is lost, we will pay the price, but we will not count the cost," unquote. Which is basically a more poetic form of saying, okay, if this is what it takes, bring it on. If I have to sit here on the floor crying like a baby, I can take it, And I was back the next morning, 8 o'clock. So I'm paying back a debt here because Rush are the ones who made me walk off the beaten track, and Ayn Rand gave me the serenity to keep on this track. So thanks a bunch, guys. So back to Rush. Their third album, 1975, was not well received at all by neither fans nor critics. And instead of playing arenas in New York like they had before, they suddenly were back, playing in Frog Balls, Iowa, in front of 20 people. And then they called it the Down the Tubes tour at the time. And there was no money coming in. They lived on sandwiches. They had to sleep in their car, etc. And they thought they were finished, And the record company was very dissatisfied about sales and talked about dropping them if they didn't get more commercial. Says manager Ray Daniels, quote, "I remember going to Chicago and meeting with Mercury Records to not give up on the band, to not drop the band. I nodded to every request they had. They wanted singles, more commercial. Yes, sure, I'm sure what they're going to do," unquote. So the record company gave the green light to one more album. Now, consider this situation. Here you are at a crossroads of your life. You are flat broke, and you have to make a choice. Either you continue to do what you love with almost certain failure in front of you, or you give in to outside pressure and go in a direction you don't really want to go. Now, that's a Howard Rock situation, if I ever saw one. Says singer Geddy Lee, quote, "We talked about how we would rather go down fighting than trying to make that kind of record that they wanted us to make. We made the album figuring everyone would hate it, but we were gonna go down in a blaze of glory," unquote. And here's from guitarist Alex Lifeson, quote, "We all decided that we would rather go back to our jobs, working on a farm or working as a plumber's mate for my dad or whatever, than give in and just be something that everybody else wanted us to be," unquote. Granite Quarry, anyone? So the album they made was 2112, and they dedicated it to the genius of Ayn Rand. So the record company wanted commercial songs to be played on the radio? The title track alone runs 21 minutes, and it tells the story of a totalitarian society where everything is controlled by a caste of priests, including literature and music. And then one day, the hero of the story, in a cave behind a waterfall, finds an old guitar and wonders what this strange device might be. And he discovers that he can make music with it, and then goes to present his new wonder to the council of priests. Does that sound vaguely familiar to you? And this thing just exploded, because this story of the individual against the mass did communicate, and the news spread by the classic form of word of mouth. First it went gold, then it went platinum, then it went double platinum, then it was triple platinum. It was finally their declaration of independence, and the record company never again approached them about getting more commercial. Says drummer Neil Peart, quote, "I think everything I do has Howard Rourke in it. The person I write for is Howard Rourke," unquote. And here again from singer Geddy Lee, quote, "The works of Ayn Rand, especially Anthem and The Fountainhead, were real eye-openers for us then. They gave us the strength not to sell out and keep doing our own thing," unquote. So they had stood up for what they believed was good, had preserved their integrity, and they lived on to see a career that lasted 40 years. Now, I had more examples of bands that killed or didn't kill their dreams, but 2 is all we have time for, and you can ask me in the question period for more. So now, let's consider these 2 examples, and here is my non-comprehensive list of how not to kill your dream, of how not to kill your dreams. Number 1, most important, don't focus primarily, and I underscore, don't focus primarily on the money, but on your love for your work. Now write it down. Usually, what stops people from pursuing their dreams is worrying about money. And I say stop worrying about money. Your love for the work that you do is what it must be all about. And that's the point I was trying to make with the Dee Snider example. If you are still worried about having to eat sandwiches for the rest of your life, what you have is not a dream. In fact, I would say, if you are prepared to eat sandwiches for the rest of your life, it makes it all the more probable that you'll never have to do it. If you think this is a real possibility, you will work much harder to avoid it. You have to make it in juggling or photography or whatever, or it's flipping burgers to the end of your life. And that should really motivate you. And I suppose, suppose you really had to save every penny and eat sandwiches for a couple of years, as I have done. Believe me, this is the best tasting food you've ever had in your life because of the pride that you will feel when eating it. This is the issue of, inner happiness versus outer happiness. True happiness comes from within. It doesn't come from outside material things. And if you can't stomach the idea that you can't afford a new car or new shoes every year, what you have is not a dream. Make that a nice hobby instead. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you know your material, if you become an expert in your field, you won't starve. Doesn't happen, and I will stand by that till the end of my life. Point number 2, I call this don't always have a plan B. Don't always have a plan B. Thanks. Now, by a plan B, I mean something like a safety net, like an old job to fall back on. And I'm leaving out here special circumstances like athletes, where the career is limited by its nature. An athlete has to have a plan B for later. An athlete's career is over by, I don't know, say 35, 40 or whatever. No, that's not what I'm talking about here. A safety net, it will keep you from having to work really, really hard and from pursuing your dream with the necessary determination. So if you think, if photography doesn't work out, I can always go back to my old job, that psychology will keep you from putting in the backbreaking work required to become expert in your field. Here's a quote from Dee Snider's book, quote, "It's too easy to allow yourself to fail when failure isn't that bad. When failure means complete and total self-destruction, you work much harder to succeed, unquote. And I say go all in. Don't wait for a better moment, because that moment will probably never come. I never had a plan B, and for me, this was the one factor that saved me. Suddenly, I had time on my hands. I had time. And that's what a beginner needs. He needs time to become expert in his chosen field. With a safety net, you can very easily rationalize why this isn't the right time to quit your present job. There's always going to be some problem or other. I better wait until Uncle Bob comes back from maternity leave or whatever. If you keep waiting for a better moment, you're going to wait forever. Don't end up like Peter Keating, who didn't marry Katie when he had the chance. Very bad. Number 3 on the non-comprehensive list. Don't try to be all things to all people. Don't try to be all things to all people. And that was the point of the Dee Snider example, trying to appeal to everybody. It can't be done. Don't try to please everybody. Can I see by a show of hands, who has seen the TV show Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay? Okay, we have a few takers. Just to give you an idea, Gordon Ramsay is a famous chef, right? He goes to struggling restaurants to see what's wrong with the restaurant and put them back on track. And 99 cases out of 100, what's wrong with the restaurant is they have too many dishes on the menu. You see? And that's really impossible because, just to give you an idea, like there's an Italian restaurant, say, and they think, of course we have pasta and pizza and all of that, but, many people like Indian food, let's say. And why shouldn't we have Indian food also? So we can kill 2 customers with 1 stone cold meatball, and of course that is ridiculous. Because what happens is, lots of dishes on the menu, and of course they have to buy in frozen food because it's impossible to have fresh ingredients for 100 dishes. And so they have to buy in frozen food and then microwave the food, and the quality goes down, and they wonder, well, why aren't the customers just, streaming in like crazy? Doesn't work that way. I mean, just to give you a totally bizarre example, suppose you're on Brook one day, and the people from ARI sat down and said, we're not getting 10 million clicks on YouTube. What's wrong with it? And they decided, all this intellectual stuff, not too many people are interested in that. You're on, what you should do, next time you're on stage, you should do balloon animals. Who doesn't love a balloon animal? So next time, you do balloon animals. And that way, we get the intellectuals, they're interested in philosophy, and the others enjoy the balloon animals. And so, wow, road to stardom, doesn't happen. That's deliberately bizarre. But, Italian and Indian doesn't make any more sense, or psychology and bicycle repair, or whatever. It doesn't happen. What you get is a Keating kind of building, modern with a Gothic spire, and this is simply hopeless. What I'm trying to say is you need to specialize. You need to find your own little niche. You see. So number 4. I call this the issue of regret. Regret. I said that you shouldn't focus primarily on the money. And here's one thing that money can't buy. It can't turn back time. I knew at the wise old age of 18 that I couldn't face the idea, having to look back at 45 and saying, I wish I had done it, when I had the chance, and now it's too late. There's a nice little depression for you. And I guess that's why the term midlife crisis is so common and so real. Do you remember in Atlas Shrugged, what the tramp said to Dagny on the train? Quote, I think it's a sin to sit down and let your life go by without making a try for it, unquote. Yeah, failure is always possible, but fear kills more dreams than failure ever did. Now, I hope you don't interpret that as, okay, I have no experience in the field, I'm 8 months pregnant, and I'm starting to be a mountain explorer tomorrow. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm speaking in the context of trying to become an expert in your field. That's really, really important. Okay, my time is running out. Point number 5, and just quickly. I call this know thyself, and this is about the issue of, rationalizations and outside temptations. If you are self-employed, like a photographer or a juggler, if you are self-employed, nothing is harder than the constant distractions and temptations. Let me check my email, let me check Facebook and all of that. I'm not feeling too hot today, all of that. It will never stop. And you must make a conscious effort to resist these temptations. And it's always easy to rationalize temptations. If I sleep an hour longer, I will be more productive later and all of that. It might even be true. But you need to know your material, like psychology or photography or whatever. And your attitude to backbreaking work is the decisive factor. And I think it's helpful to recall Ayn Rand's attitude towards writing. And here's Ayn Rand. This is from a Q&A. I didn't write it down. Never mind. It's from a Q&A. Here's Ayn Rand, quote, "My attitude towards writing? That I have no right to anything except to run to my desk. No right to breathe, no right to live. That's my attitude. You only stop when you're ready to collapse. I imagine it's like being pregnant. There is something alive that demands priority over everything. You're under that pressure constantly." And this is certainly very, unquote. And this is certainly very tough, and I know it from experience. And you are the only person who can judge if your love for your work is strong enough to see you through these times. And you have to sort of wrest these little daily victories from Netflix or Facebook or whatever. Might be a good idea. I mean, if this is your particular poison, watching Netflix, it might be a good idea. I don't know. Cancel the subscription. You have to put in 12, 14-hour days if you want to become expert in your field. For me, it's like video games. I could do this forever. And that means, okay, I don't have control over that. Okay, uninstall the game. Drastic measures. Sometimes it's necessary. Okay, last point on the list. Number 6. Remember, whatever it is that you want to do, psychology, photography, shoe shop, whatever it is, you are not the only person on the planet who loves what you do. We have 7-8 billion people on the planet. I mean, what are the chances that you won't find customers? I mean, chances are 0. So what I'm trying to say is in wrapping up here, folks, life is short. My father died when he was only 51. I'm 45 now. I have no reason to suspect that fate has the same thing in store for me. But some of us, by definition, have to go sooner than average. Time flies, and I can hear it ticking away. Tick, tick, tick. Self-esteem is a major issue in objectivism. What will it do to your self-esteem if you look back and say, I gave up before making a try. I gave in at the first sign of pressure at obstacle number 1. Well, folks, you are obstacle number 1. As I said earlier, I never gave a blessed thought about marketing and advertising and strategy, etc. So just imagine what you can accomplish by actually thinking about these things. I mean, it should be a piece of cake for you. And also remember what Dagny thought after a long, dreary day in the office. Quote from Atlas Shrugged. The only pride of her workday was not that it had been lived, but that it had been survived. It was wrong, she thought. It was viciously wrong that one should ever be forced to say that about any hour of one's life, unquote. And so it is. The rest of your life starts today. Make it count. Don't be afraid. Learn to steer by the stars. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks a bunch. Thank you. So we have ample time for Q&A. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes?
I'm curious if you have any advice for what to do after you've accomplished your initial big dream. Say your dream was always to become a professional juggler, and you worked for years to get there, and now you've made it. And now you're sort of in a routine of you're playing shows and just kind of maintaining your skills. What sort of goals do you set for yourself at that point to keep things interesting, keep yourself dreaming?
Okay. I always like to put things into perspective, you know? And my friend Matthew here, he used to say, how many jugglers can the world support? You know, not very many, obviously. And I, you know, a goal is, you know, to stay alive, you know, to have a roof over your head. As a juggler, I mean, not very many people can do that, you know. And I like to, you know, I'm not trying to say, you know, that's going to be it forever. You know, I still love juggling, and there's always another trick I want to learn. There's always another thing that you can do. Same. I mean, I always compare it to playing a musical instrument. You see, there's always another song that's more difficult than the ones that you know. What keeps me dreaming? I love juggling. I love my work. There's nothing else I'd rather do. Nothing, you know. And sometimes it's very hard sometimes, you know, to remember. Oh, you know, that is why I have to get up in the morning. You know, why not lie in? Why not Indeed? You know, why not take it easy now that you got it? Doesn't happen with any business. You know, as soon as you're trying to stagnate, that is the way down. That is your downfall. Because there's always competition. There's new blood coming in. You know, and you simply can't afford it. That doesn't happen. You have to. You have to rekindle the flame every day, and that is sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's very difficult. I don't know. That's basically the only thing I can say. I simply am in love with my work, and that's what keeps me going. After, what, 27 years. To be perfectly honest with you, there have been times when motivation was lower than in my very early days. Of course, I admit that, and it's you know, it's like there's a candle burning, and sometimes you have to push in the wax to fuel the fire, so to say, and you have to be perfectly honest and brutally honest with yourself. You know, as soon as you realize, oh, you know, I'm in a rut. What's going on? You know, this is like the same old thing. You know, you better be careful, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself and admit to the fact and say, hey, I'd better, you know, kick myself in the, you know, where, you know. So, but it's certainly tough. I mean, but after 27 years or something, you know, I know myself pretty well. So I don't. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I'd appreciate anything sort of more concrete than that. If you have any specific goal-setting techniques you use or anything like that, but.
Oh, okay. I mean, we can. I don't want to bore the audience to death with juggling technique. You know that because I think that, you know, this is from way out of left field, really. And well, we can talk about this privately later on, of course. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Are you a juggler? Okay.
Thank you so much for a very inspiring talk, which was also realistic and practical. Okay. My dad was a very successful serial entrepreneur, and when I was trying to decide what to do in life, he told me, go for what you love to do. Because he said, that's what he always did. I said, but you work so hard. He said, what work? I never did anything that wasn't fun. But he said, when it comes to earning a living, he said, do what you love to do, and then go out and find whoever will pay you to do it. He says, and you can find them. He says, even if you love to sleep, you can test mattresses.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I was trying to say when I said, know thyself. You know yourself better than anyone else on the planet. So
Yes.
that should give you ample indication of what direction do you like. Do you like to read books? Do you like to kick the ball or whatever it is? Yeah, and take it from there.
Yeah.
So, great, yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
So, in the beginning, you made you brought up Twisted Sister and how they sold out, and in turn, they ended up going broke. And then you mentioned Rush doing the exact opposite, and then having a great album as a result and making a lot of money from it. But if you look at the music industry now, especially today, it seems as though the majority of the bands who are commercially successful have sold out. And the bands that are truly unique, it's harder and harder for them to become successful. Especially they've done a lot of studies that have shown that music today is getting more homogenous and it's getting much more formulated. And so I think the creativity is being lost in all of that. So I would just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay. I don't know if it's true in the first place.
Okay.
I think with YouTube and everything, it's a lot easier for bands, for unknown bands, for not so famous bands, than it was, say, 15, 20 years ago. Is Alex here? Alex, yeah. Alex has an album out. It's fantastic, and without the internet, I would never have learned about this. So in one way, it's easier, and of course, the quote commercial easy listening stuff will always have more followers than the progressive rock, Rush, complex kind of thing that you really need to listen to. I mean, just by definition, people that love to hear elevator music. I don't know why, but there it is. And more people read, True Confession magazines than Ayn Rand. Beats me why. That's just the way it is. There are, I mean, I mean, I'm not from the music industry, so I wouldn't know if what you said is true, after all, And I had more examples from people just in one sentence. Avril Lavigne, you know her? Avril Lavigne got a contract at the age of 16, right? And she really wasn't happy the way the record company wanted her to go. Right? She was very unhappy, said, this is real too commercial and all of that. And she walked out on that contract. She said, okay, I'm not going to do it, and walked out at the age of 16. I mean, wow. And then the record company came back and said, hey, we didn't mean it that way and all of that. So, and wow. So there are people of integrity all of the time. And that's basically all I know. And as I said in the beginning, there is no invisible man in the clouds who rewards people of integrity. Yeah, there are sellouts and they're successful. Too bad for us. I mean, what can you do?
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
With characters like Rourke and like with yourself, it always feels like dreams or
Don't put the
something.
two of us in the same
Just one
sentence.
parallel, just one parallel. It always feels like dreams are something someone's like born with, right? And then they just know to go after it. I assume that's not really the case, right? That you sort of build a passion, you don't just discover
Exactly.
it. So, like, I guess what advice do you have for sort of building a passion?
The million-dollar question. Okay, I expected it. We could have an entire conference on that. Best advice I can give you in like 3 sentences is go to Dr. Peikoff's podcast and Google in the words career. He has a lot to say on that. It's very hard. I mean, for me, I learned to juggle by accident. It was a freak accident, you know. I don't know. If I hadn't been in that particular place at that particular day, who knows? I would have become, I don't know, shoe shop. I have no idea. I have no idea. You know, it's like a freak accident. And yeah, how to find a career passion when you don't already have one is the million-dollar question. I mean, the best thing I can say, and this is what Dr. Peikoff says, you know the general direction of what you like. You know, is it more physical, more intellectual, or whatever? And try to explore fields. You know, okay, look left and right a little bit, but go to Dr. Peikoff's podcast page and search for career. He has a lot to say about it, and he's much more. He's much more intelligent than I am. So what can I say? The best advice I can give. I mean, we could have an entire conference on just that alone.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Mikey.
Hey.
Hey.
Thank you so much for that incredible talk. Very inspiring. I feel inspired.
Good.
And I was curious, what were the other bands or groups that had to be cut for time?
Say again?
What were the other bands and groups beyond Rush and Dee Snider that had to be cut for time from your talk?
One was Megadeth, Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. Just so you know, Dave Mustaine was the guitarist in Metallica before Metallica was famous. And he got kicked out of the band and then formed his own band who became spectacular successful. And I've written something down. This is a quote from this man. And just here. In 1992, Megadeth's album Countdown to Extinction debuted number 2 on the album charts. I mean, this is a huge success for a thrash metal band, right? A couple of months later, Metallica's Black Album came in at number 1, and Dave Mustaine was devastated. And here's what he said, quote, "My success didn't matter. Countdown to Extinction was double platinum. That didn't matter. I had nothing because I was still comparing myself to my previous band." Unquote. Is that Peter Keating or what? You know, why is he still comparing his own success to somebody else? I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? And to this day, he's a very unhappy man. You know, drug abuse and all of that. He can't get over that. Instead of just, okay, been there, done that, leave it behind. Great, these people are number 1, and I myself am selling millions of albums. Great, you know, let's live it up. I mean, no, he can't do that. He can't let go. And it's destroyed his life, basically. And that's just horrible, horrible. And this is the fountainhead in real life. And the envious hatred of the good kind of thing. You know, I hate these people for being successful. I mean, that's as low as you can go. Countdown to Extinction is a great album. All the same.
It is. Thank you.
Last question, yeah.
Thank you so much for your talk, sir. You did briefly...
You need to kiss the mic, and that goes for all of you for the rest of the conference. You need to kiss the mic.
Very good. Again, thank you so much for your talk, sir. You did briefly... It's weird to hear. Anyway, you did briefly mention, like, if you can't... If you feel that the insecurity that, you know, being an artist breeds in your life, if you feel that, you know, that's not something that you're going to be able to deal with, you know, then it's a sign that it's not a dream. It's maybe something you pursue on the side or as a hobby. Like, how would, like, do you have any thoughts on coming to that determination, or, you know, how would you tell the difference?
Of course, when making your first steps, let's say, in my case, a juggler, huh? And the first shows you do is like local little things, you know, birthday party, and you get paid by a piece of cake or whatever. You don't get a piece of cake. And you see, oh, okay, you know, these things work, others don't work. You know, you're making your first steps. And quickly you realize, especially as a stage performer, you know, if you thought, I have this great joke, and then nobody laughs, you know, that is pretty devastating. And that gives you, oh, maybe I'm approaching this from the wrong end of the stick, really. I mean, you think it over. And that goes for everything. You know, if you want to be a photographer, but nobody, you just don't come out the way you thought that would look like, and whatever, makes you reconsider the whole thing. And ideally, you build this up with baby steps. You know, you don't just, okay, I have no experience in the field, now I want to be a professional. That's not very advisable. You know, so and while making your first steps, that if you introspect really carefully, you know, you will have lots of material to go by. You say, it doesn't feel right. You know, I have to be up at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, you have to drag yourself out of bed. That's an indication. You know, oh, maybe you know, maybe this is not the thing for me. That's all I can say, really. It depends on outside circumstances, you know, you have kids and whatever, you know, very difficult to go into that. But we can also talk about that later, to go into the specifics. I'd be more than happy. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, great. So that's it for me. Thanks. It's been a pleasure. See you later. See you later.